panelists and begin the main event, I'll just walk everyone through our agenda. So next slide, please. So we'll be doing about 5 minutes of introductions. Then we'll have a 15-minute presentation from the guys at Good Call, and then a 15-minute presentation from Jacob at Uptrust, then 15 minutes of moderated Q&A, and 10 minutes of audience Q&A. As Cameron mentioned, you can type in your questions at any time throughout the WebEx, so feel free to type them in, and we'll pose them to our panelists at the very end of the webinar. So next slide, please. So before we begin engaging our panelists, I'd like to provide a bit of history and information about the Right to Counsel National Campaign for those of you who are less familiar. Next slide, please. The Right to Counsel National Campaign is a public awareness initiative that uses value-based communication to inform policymakers, criminal justice stakeholders, and the public about the importance of the Sixth Amendment right to counsel, the challenges faced by public defenders, the power of effective representation, and the roles everyone can play in ensuring the constitutional right to counsel is upheld. The Right to Counsel National Campaign is comprised of multidisciplinary group of consortium members, including defenders, prosecutors, law enforcement, judges, legislators, funders, community advocates, impacted community members, court personnel, policymakers, and researchers. The Right to Counsel consortium members recognize that to make sustainable and comprehensive change, every system actor must play an active role in ensuring the right to counsel and effective public defense. The Right to Counsel National Campaign aims to spearhead broad-based initiatives by policymakers within and outside of the criminal justice system to support public defense, public defenders, and the clients they represent. The Right to Counsel National Campaign recognizes that the criminal courtroom can be a confusing and overwhelming place, and that being connected to an attorney early and often is critical to mitigating the collateral consequences of criminal justice involvement. Which brings us to the topic of today's webinar, highlighting 2 enterprising startups utilizing technology to ensure that people facing criminal charges and the attorneys who represent them can better navigate the criminal court process. We are very excited to have Jacob Stills, the CEO of Uptrust, joining us. Uptrust is a text messaging service that reminds people to attend court and provides an opportunity for people to connect to their public defenders to ask questions or voice concerns during the pretrial process. We are also very lucky to have Gabriel Lederrose and Jelani Anglin, the co-executive directors of Good Call, joining us today. Good Call launched a 24-hour hotline in New York City in October 2016 that connects people who are arrested with lawyers to provide them legal support and representation within minutes of their arrest. So with that, I'll hand it over to Gabe and Jelani to tell us more about Good Call.
Great, thank you so much for hosting us, everyone. Cameron, just to clarify, I'm just going to have to say next for each slide. Is that correct?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Next. So to start out, just to kind of give a little bit of background, Jelani and I and our other 2 co-founders of Good Call came together about 2 years ago through a incubator called Blue Ridge Labs, which aims to use technology to address problems facing low-income New Yorkers. So we come from backgrounds in community organizing and technology, but really wanted to see how we could make something new to help folks, particularly in the way that they deal with the police and the criminal justice system in heavily policed communities in New York City. Next. And so to start out this process, we went out into the community and spoke to dozens and dozens of people about their experience dealing with the police and the criminal justice system. And this was a young man who we spoke with. His name was Ray, whose story was particularly kind of powerful to us. He was arrested from his apartment in Brooklyn for, quote unquote, fitting the description of a suspect that the police were looking for. And he ended up sitting in pretrial jail on Rikers Island for 2 whole weeks before they realized they had the wrong person and released him. And at that point, he had lost his job and was at risk of losing his apartment. And one of the things he said was, I know I didn't do anything, but I didn't know who to call when he was dealing with that situation. Next slide. So for those of you on the call who work in public defense, this process will likely be very familiar to you, but what we heard from Ray and countless other people about their kind of experiences were that, folks would get arrested for either, fitting the description like Ray, or for, hopping a turnstile, or, maybe drinking a beer in front of their apartment. They would get taken to a precinct, their cell phones would be taken away, and so the only way they could reach out for help was by calling a few numbers that they had memorized ahead of time, which made it very difficult to reach loved ones. Most people would just try to call their moms because that's the only number that they knew, and a lot of times they wouldn't get an answer. And no one was able to call the person they needed most in this moment, a lawyer, right? And so they wouldn't meet their public defender until just minutes before going in front of a judge, giving them no time to kind of tell their public defender about the situation, and giving their public defender very, very little time to actually, prepare for the arraignment, call loved ones, do any other investigation. And also, a lot of times at that point, folks had already been put in a lineup, made statements to the police, and a lot of things that would end up kind of hurting their case and their due process. Next slide. And so the consequences of this kind of lack of support in these critical 48 hours after an arrest were really devastating. It would lead to people, taking plea deals for things that they didn't do just to get out of the system, leaving them with an undeserved criminal record, mental and physical trauma from that process, and from being held in pretrial jail when that would happen. Folks would lose their jobs because they couldn't call out of work. It can have a lot of other implications, obviously, for folks that have any kind of complication around their immigration status, and of course, can lead to unpayable bail being set, leaving people to sit in pretrial jail. In New York City, the average stay on Rikers Island awaiting trial is 50 days. So obviously, huge consequences for individuals and communities that have to deal with this issue. Next slide. So just some kind of stats about how big of a problem this is. In New York City alone, every day, 125 people are sent to pretrial jail and held for an average of 50 days, as I just mentioned. Next slide. Overall, there's almost 300,000 people that are arrested every year who, are represented by public defenders and don't have early access to an attorney. The vast majority are for low-level misdemeanors concentrated in low-income communities, and pretrial jail costs New York City alone over $1 billion every year. Next slide. And nationally, obviously, these numbers are much bigger. 12 million people arrested and held in jail without immediate access to an attorney before they're convicted of any crime, and costing taxpayers nationally over $14 billion per year. Next. So in addition to talking to folks in police communities, we also talked to public defenders about their experience with this sort of early part of the post-arrest process, and heard some of their challenges, which included just the fact that there was no way to reach clients before arraignments to get ahead of some of those issues and start preparing, and that it was also really difficult to reach out to clients' families, which can have a huge impact on the outcome of an arraignment if you can get a family member in the courtroom. But on such short notice and without having good contact information, it was very difficult to get in touch with them. Some offices had actually tried to launch hotlines to get in touch with folks earlier, but ran into some trouble kind of coordinating coverage between their staff, tracking the results, making sure that folks were getting the help they need, and dealing with calls coming into those hotlines that they couldn't actually help with. Next slide. And so based on kind of all of these insights that we gathered from the community and from public defenders in the city, we created Good Call, which has two main components. So we run a totally free 24/7 hotline that anyone can call if they get arrested or a loved one gets arrested. and our software will immediately connect them with a public defender at one of our partner organizations, currently working with the Bronx Defenders and Legal Aid Society, and likely to bring on a few more partners in the short term. We also added a feature that is not a prerequisite for using the hotline, but we allow folks to save emergency contact information on our website or via text message, and then we make this accessible to the public defender staffing the hotline. So for example, I could put in I could put in Jelani's information and my mom's contact information, and God forbid I ever got arrested. I could call that hotline, get legal support, and then additionally have that attorney reach out to Jelani and my mom to collect information and make sure they were there to support me. Next slide. For the kind of arrest process with Good Call, when it is used, once again, someone would get to the precinct, but instead of trying to think about which loved one's number they would have memorized and who they could reach, they can simply dial 8333 Good Call and get connected to an attorney in under a minute who can invoke their rights, tell them not to say anything to the police, and start taking whatever legal follow-up action is necessary. Next slide. And then here's a screenshot of our web dashboard that we allow that attorney to look for. So, once again, if I gave some information about an emergency contact that I wanted to reach, next slide. With the click of a button, they could send a text message to that person. Next slide. Next slide. And get in touch. And so I won't read through all of these, but we've seen, every arrest case is different, but there are a whole multitude of different benefits that this early intervention can have. Being able to witness lineups, invoke rights, reach out to loved ones, look into case history, all of these things that result in a fairer, better outcome for clients, and limit the chances that someone will end up in jail for the wrong reasons. Next slide. So this is a photo of actually a young man and his mother who used Good Call last year. Jameek here on the left was arrested from his apartment with his mother and accused of a robbery that he had nothing to do with. His mother is a home health aide. She had to go to work. She called the precinct. They couldn't tell her where her son was, and she didn't know what to do. But luckily, she had received Good Call's number through someone else in the community who received one of the cards that we hand out, was able to call, get an attorney on the phone right away. He called around to various precincts around the Bronx until he found her son, and then actually went down to the precinct to visit him. And when he got there, he saw the police putting her son in a biased lineup where they showed the victim her son before anyone else, sort of hinting at the fact that he was the prime suspect, and so that suggestion made the victim pick him out. Luckily, since there was an attorney there to see this, he was able to bring this up at the arraignment, get that information thrown out, and Jameek was able to walk out of court that very day instead of being sent on a bus to Rikers Island. Next slide. So to talk a little bit more, since obviously in this webinar we're focused kind of on the technology and how other organizations are working with public defenders, going to go a little bit into that. Next slide. And a lot of the technology that we built was really based on this feedback of the challenges from public defender offices. Next slide. What our kind of smart hotline software allows our partners to do is easily provide this 24/7 coverage without needing to staff a bunch of attorneys at a call center just sitting around waiting for calls to come in around the clock. And so we allow our partners to send us schedules so that they can divide up the hotline staffing throughout their entire staff and have, some people take an evening, some people take a day, and then we have smart call routing that makes sure that the right call is getting to the right person at the right time. So whether it's emergency or non-emergency, what the issue is, what language the caller speaks, we take all of those things into account to make sure they get to the right place. We also offer a multi-level staffing feature, so if a call is missed, our system can detect that and send it to a different attorney to make sure that people are getting help in these emergency situations. And we also make it easy for the community and for public defenders by offering one centralized number. So rather than folks having to remember, a bunch of different phone numbers for different offices or having offices picking up the phone and having callers from boroughs outside of their own or people calling with issues they can't help with. We just make it more easy to use and more efficient for everyone. Next slide. We also, as I mentioned before, offer our emergency contact directory and a tool for the folks staffing the hotline to reach loved ones. Next slide. Also built into this dashboard, we allow our partners to track the results and look at their call history to make sure that they're calling folks back to see what types of reasons people are calling in for, when they're calling in, and we can use that data to make the staffing more efficient and the software more efficient. Next slide. We also collect surveys from the attorneys who staff the hotline and callers to try to determine kind of what impact this early intervention had and make sure that the support being provided by the hotline is high quality and helpful. Next slide. And here I'll hand it over to Jelani to speak a bit about our kind of community engagement, which is another very critical part of this whole process.
Thank you, Gabe. So as Gabe said, we built this technology to really help the community, but if the community doesn't use it, it doesn't really mean much. So we started working with organizations that have already been in this space and doing this work for a while, and seeing how we can help those folks and their participants with doing the work that they are already doing. So we set up an outreach team that is made up of all folks that are system impacted. And these are folks that are actually working in communities that they're from. So what we're seeing is that that's actually developing trust within the community, and it's actually helping us develop a momentum at a really fast pace. It's really exciting, actually. Next slide. So right now we're in our New York City expansion. So we're expanding to all 5 boroughs in New York City, making sure that we can provide folks with this early legal intervention. Next slide. So before we started with this expansion, we started with the proof of concept pilot, as Gabe spoke about earlier, which was just in the Bronx. And with this proof of concept pilot, we were able to connect over 600 people to legal support, have user satisfaction rating of over 90%, a hold time of under a minute. Folks have given us times around 39 seconds or 42 seconds, but we've always heard times that have been under a minute, and almost 400 emergency contacts saved, and real success stories. So right now, we are looking at what it looks like to expand to all 5 boroughs with this additional support from Bronx Defenders and Legal Aid Society. So we've been connecting with community groups that have been already in this space doing work, and they've been handing out information and really trying to see what does it look like to bring folks that have been impacted by the system to the forefront to help them empower their communities with getting this right to legal representation when they need it most. Next slide. So we're really trying to build our support with community groups. So definitely always connecting with more folks that are doing this work is essential. So I always leave this portion open to say, hey, if anybody knows of other groups in New York City, small or large, we always like to hear from folks and have them get our information, see if there's opportunities or ways in which we can work together. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah, so our vision is we want to make sure that no matter what you look like, what color you are, how much money you have access to legal representation. We've seen in New York with our pilot that things are working. We want to actually do this nationwide. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, both Gabe and Jelani, for telling us all about Good Call. And we have a bunch of questions we're going to ask you, but first we're going to turn it over to Jacob at Uptrust to tell us all about the work that he's doing, and then we'll open it up for both moderator and audience Q&A thereafter. Jacob, take it away.
Go ahead, one more slide. Great. And so, what Uptrust is we remind people of court and connect them to social services so they attend. And this came out of just looking at the criminal justice system as being very sort of dehumanizing and confusing for a lot of individuals. And what we're going to focus on today are people attending court and other sort of mandatory obligations. Now, if you go to the next slide. One of the things that, we looked at was we started really thinking about bail reform and why is it that so many people couldn't afford bail and were stuck in jail. And when we sat in bail hearings, what really became super clear to us was judges and prosecutors were often conflating attendance risk with flight risk, which is to say, the picture here is what people are actually dealing with, but when someone misses court, people are watching too much episodes of Law and Order and thinking people are flying on a jet to France or Mexico or something of that nature. And so what we realized was, well, most of your clients don't have any money. They don't even have the ability to flee, even if they wanted to. So what would be really, really important here to clear up a lot of the noise and things like pretrial risk assessments at all, or to show that people would attend court. And so what we thought was, if we could prove that everyone would show up to court, we could really help eliminate the use of money bail or electronic monitoring, because if someone was arrested for something that the judge or prosecutor was comfortable with them releasing if they had money, well, all of a sudden you wouldn't really have to deal with that risk. And so what we really started doing next was trying to understand why people missed court. And not surprisingly, and I won't sort of belabor the facts because you all on the call understand these issues, but, the issues were, not, getting the reminder because you moved around a lot, or forgetting because you have so many things going on in your life, child care, transportation, asking for time off work. These were a host of things that we were, impeding low-income individuals to make it to court. And we said, well, maybe we can solve that. These are all things that are attainable. So if you go to the next slide, one of the things that we thought about was, well, what would be the right product to build and why was it sort of important to help people attend court? And I think there's sort of three things that make this a really important thing to be covering right now. Helping your clients make it to court is really important because bail reform most likely will happen. And I think there's a huge risk if you look at what's happened recently in California with the Humphrey decision, as well as a few other legislation that's been afoot, is people may get rid of money bail, but also be more comfortable with use of electronic monitoring and geolocation apps. And these are going to really hurt your clients because they're either A, going to increase the costs and the fees on them, or B, give them other opportunities to make a technical violation, which will once again translate to them spending time in jail. Two, and this is more of a holistic view, that most of your clients need assistance, they don't require control. I think what's been really interesting is when we did a lot of user research, we spoke to a lot of people that were homeless on the streets, and I had assumed they would not have cared about attending court. And they all said, no, I know I need to show up, it's just often tough or I'll forget it, so we try to remind each other. And so I think this sort of movement of the system from risk-based or controlling to needs-based is really, really important if we're going to see large-scale transformation of the criminal justice system. And why I'm so excited to be speaking to everyone today is I think the public defenders in the community have a really important place to play here. There has been an ownership of the mantle of pretrial services that are definitely probation or court-led, and I think that can be problematic because you all, as attorneys, have your defendants, well-being as a priority, and I think that's really important to sort of do that right now and to take that. So the next slide. So in terms of the solution we actually built was, as I mentioned before, people had a lot of difficulty making it to court, about 15 to 20%, but no one was fleeing. And so we thought about, well, if you looked at something like, I never got the reminder, we were like, well, how can we deliver a reminder that's going to get to you? As the folks from Good Call were saying earlier, SMS is really, really important. Your clients today more than ever have a phone. It is their lifeline. And so text message is a really good way of reaching out to them. As a lot of you also probably already know, because that's how you probably text your clients reminders anyway. We also know people were forgetting to show up because they had so much stuff going on in their lives. And so instead of just sending something 30 days in advance or the day before, we thought it was important to send a message, upon onboarding, send a message a week before and a day before. Also, we thought about all the needs that people had. Some of these needs were, real like transportation or childcare. Some of them were more just reminders to help people keep a better calendar. And so we thought about, well, if we could get information from a public defender of does a client have a job, we could text them a week before to remind them to ask for time off of work. And so we really thought through, in some respects, nothing here is rocket science, right? You all and or your best attorneys do a lot of this work anyway. It was actually a conversation with Insha Rahman at Bureau Group during the early days of our sort of building out our prototype, where she said, look, this would really save me a lot of time because I was doing a bunch of this work, but it was taking me, 60 to 90 minutes a day. And what we thought about was, well, public defenders have such big caseloads. If we could help them, be more effective and more efficient, that would really help. Also, we thought about, well, what are actual services that we can start adding onto the platform? Groups like Participatory Defense Hub or bail funds or other community groups. We thought through that via text message, we could coordinate a lot of care that the community was already doing. And so what we found is, next slide, is by facilitating two-way conversations and automating certain amount of the outreach, we're able to really deliver assistance that people need, which has resulted in us having about 95% of low-income defendants on our program attend court, up from between 80 to 85%. And where this is really critical for us is another piece of information we had when we launched was that people felt the system was dehumanizing. And I think that's something that Gabe and Jelani were mentioning earlier. And any way that you can, and usually I suppose that technology generally perpetuates this sort of dehumanization, that you're not talking to a person, you're talking to a computer. And what we thought about was you have, tens of thousands of public defenders around the country that care about their clients. And by facilitating certain automated messages and allowing them to have a real conversation like on this slide, we were able to really humanize the system that's going to deliver more attendance, and more attendance should result in you being able to get more clients released pre-trial without any sort of onerous terms. So if you go to the next slide, I think for us, all this stuff is great in sort of at a high level thought, but if it doesn't deliver the results and the data, it's really tough to push for long-lasting change or behavior change from the bench. And so for us, the attendance rate's really critical, showing over a 70% improvement. Another one that was really interesting was we did not know if people would write back when we created our system as being two-way, right? That we text things on behalf of an attorney, and then low-income clients can respond back. About 30% of people respond back, and the number one response is thank you, which was really, just to be honest, cool. Like we had no idea if people would like the system or not, and people are engaging with it. Other pieces that are really critical for us to understand are what are the needs that your clients need help with. And so we found was about 70% of people are relying on rides to court from friends or family or the bus. And that's really important because if you look at a lot of different jurisdictions, I noticed today we might have some people from, New Mexico or Texas, or even in places like upstate New York where the bus service might not be great. So if you live in a certain part of town, you need to get to another part of town, it could take you 3 hours, which is really tough if you're just trying to keep your job and put food on the table. Also, about 22% of defendants had child care needs, and about 80% of people had a working cell phone. And so why these are really important is what we're doing at Uptrust is we're trying to collect all these needs-based sort of data, understand the attendance rate, and now start to experiment with, well, if someone needs help with child care and we can deliver them child care in the community, does that get us closer to that 97, 98, 99% attendance? We're going to be experimenting over the next year of giving people rides to court who aren't sure how they're going to get there. And next month we're launching in California a pilot to deliver working cell phones, smartphones to people that don't have one. the idea here is if we can create a system that has zero control over the defendant, it's just delivering intelligent services, we can achieve a 97, 98% attendance rate, which really is the grist for the mill to push for bail reform, because that takes away the sort of one of the big pieces that stymies bail reform, which is, well, what's the alternative? So next slide. In terms of, how we're going to do that, for us, scale is really important, working with as many people as possible. Obviously from an impact perspective and a mission perspective, that's super critical. But also the platform itself becomes more valuable and more successful if you have more people on it. So for example, in California, we're working, with about 9 or 10 different counties. What works in, San Joaquin County, near the Bay Area, and also San Bernardino County, one of the largest counties in Southern California, is we can pool, who needs what type of help, and that can then push for, in the legislature to get certain reforms passed. But also, if you're an individual public defender in those counties, and you say, hey, I think my client should be released pretrial, whereas the judge might be risk averse and say, I'm not really sure. If you have the backing of this platform that has, several 100,000 low-income defendants on it, you can really say that you have an evidence-based solution that is going to deliver the person or help the person attend court, which I think should change judicial behavior. In terms of places where we're in a mixture of counties, for those that are dialed in, counties around the country, as well as statewide systems like Virginia and Maryland. Our new sort of states we're about to launch in are Washington and Nevada and Florida. And in terms of some of the places that we're really interested in, there's statewide systems such as, Colorado, New Mexico, North Carolina, Massachusetts, and Georgia. But we're also looking a lot at places like upstate New York and Texas, in Ohio, where you have, large population centers. You've got a real burgeoning interest in things like bail reform. But we also personally have a concern that reform may not result in, truly releasing clients pre-trial without any onerous conditions. Next slide, please. The last thing I'll sort of touch on before we open to Q&A is talking that, I know public defenders' offices are sort of sometimes, reluctant, or it's, using a new piece of technology can be scary. And part of that is the, sins of the father that a lot of people that have worked with government have not been necessarily helpful and supportive. And so for us, we don't really look for customers as much as we look for partners. And so what that means is we want to understand, the types of things that you're thinking and really ideate with you to develop new products and features. If any of you had seen our product the first day when we launched in Contra Costa County, California, you wouldn't even recognize it today, because we're always trying to iterate. So, just in this past year alone, one of the things we heard was public defenders loved our product, but, it was web-based, and it didn't really work when they were inside the courtroom or someone was running late. So we built a mobile app that's like WhatsApp, if you will, or iMessage, where attorneys can use Uptrust, respond to clients, or send Uptrust text message from their own phone without giving out their personal number. Another piece that's recent is people wanted to necessarily, similar to what Good Call does, right? The idea of, how do you, maybe your client is not the best person to reach out to, but it might be their aunt or their brother or girlfriend. And so we've added a related contacts feature where you can message multiple people. The other piece is, we as a technology provider don't have the right gravitas in a given community to sort of own, these reforms. We want to be a subcontractor to the community and help them identify where they need to build capacity and deliver these services, whether it's rides or childcare. And so what we've launched a sort of stripped down version of our product for participatory defense hubs and community bail funds that's going to sync with a public defender system. So examples of that feature that's going to roll out this summer is going to be, if you're a public defender and there's a bail fund in your jurisdiction and you want them to maybe pay bail, you think a client's going to be good, you'll be able to press a button and we'll be able to message the bail fund and give them all the information they need to show up to the court and bail out your client. Similarly, in a participatory defense hub, if you have a client, and this is happening a lot in Philadelphia, California, and New York, if you've got a client and you want people to pack the courtroom and you've got volunteers in a database, we can message all those volunteers. And then also your clients, if you want them to have go to participatory defense hub meetings, we can also message them around those issues too, not just their court date. And as I said before, the last piece is really thinking through these needs and start scaling, or start deepening the services that we connect people to. I think what we found is, not surprisingly, messaging is really the best way to get the most quote-unquote bang for your buck, which is to say, our two-way smart reminders are getting 95%-ish of the people to attend. But eventually we really need to think that text messages aren't going to help for someone who lives in a rural jurisdiction who has no way to get to court. A text message isn't going to help someone with a severe mental illness that really needs assistance. And so we're really trying to think through, how do we identify what services, how do we deliver them out of the community as efficient as possible, so that, in the future, like the world we want to live in, a public defender can coordinate these services with a click of a button, and know full well that their clients are going to be supported and not monitored. And so I think that is it from me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jacob. I absolutely want to reiterate the feedback that you got from Insha, who is a public defender with me at the Bronx Defenders, that I remember those days of getting back from court and sitting down at my desk at 4 p.m. and spending the next hour calling clients to remind them that they had court the next day, and that was time that now those attorneys are able to use actually working on the case and preparing for the next day's hearing. So that absolutely sounds like a really fantastic resource for public defenders. So Jacob, can you tell us, is there a story that comes to mind of an individual client or public defender impacted by the criminal justice system who your services helped? Yeah, I think one of the things that, really was sort of like an aha moment around that, just improving the communication channels could have this massive effect, was when we launched in Luzerne County, Pennsylvania. We turned on the system at around lunchtime, and we go back to the office, and a public defender stopped me and said, wow, I just got this message from my client. They have a funeral in Virginia, and they're not going to be showing up to court on Monday. And I said, did you not know that? And they said, no. And knowing how that office worked, or that county worked, that person was going to get a bench warrant, and they were going to end up in jail. And with this information, the public defender was able to reach out to the judge and get the court case moved, and reached out to the person and said, hey, I'll do it best I can. Thanks for letting me know. And so just being able to communicate better with your clients on their level as an attorney is going to decrease the number of your clients that end up in jail. Awesome. Yeah. And so I'd just like to remind everyone who's listening that we're opening up for questions now. I have a bunch of questions that I'd like to ask Jacob and Gabe and Jelani, but everyone should feel free to type in their questions and we'll incorporate them as we go. So Gabe and Jelani, I'd love to bring you back into the mix and ask you, we here at the Right to Counsel National Campaign do a lot of thinking about value-based messaging and how the values that underlie our work are really what are going to move people and change hearts and minds to get the support we need around the right to counsel. Gabe and Jelani, what would you say are the values that drive the work that you all do?
Jelani, do you want to lead that off, or do you want me to start?
You can start.
So I think one of the key things that guides our work is really putting the community first, and really focusing on the individuals and families and communities that end up being victims when our criminal justice process doesn't work effectively. I think particularly from kind of my background, coming from the tech space, too often there's the kind of inclination to look a little bit too big picture, or think too much about kind of the systemic level, and lose sight of the folks who actually are taking the brunt of these broken systems. And so as we think about how we grow and how we teach other people about our work, and I think this is how it kind of plays in with the right to counsel, also like informing people who don't necessarily know about this system, who aren't affected by these issues, really putting the voices in the communities that are dealing with them on a day-to-day basis at the forefront in the way that we communicate and the way that we kind of act in our work is really important. Johnny, I don't know if you want to build on that at all.
Yeah, definitely agree. The right to access is so important. As a Black man that grew up here in New York City, communities of color are always dealing with police interaction, and folks are getting arrested for trivial reasons every day. So this is something that I deal with, and that the communities deal with, that I interface with. And that really drives me to do this work. And there are so many folks that, you know, if they just had the knowledge to wait until they had legal representation to make a statement, their lives would have been different. And thinking about, as we want to end mass incarceration and cut down the folks that are in this system, we have to think about the entryway, and really just trying to cut down on that by providing access is something that drives my work, because not everybody has access, and that always circles around a socioeconomic problem. So really trying to figure out how to get at that pushes me to do this.
Awesome. Thank you both. So we had a question from one of our listeners asking both the folks at Good Call and at Uptrust, do you all have plans to protect the privacy of clients in the event of a FOIA request or some other request for internal records? Jacob, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think in terms of FOIA requests, that's not really applicable in that we're an agent of the attorney. So all of our stuff is covered under attorney-client privilege. You know, just like you might use an AT&T phone to reach out to your client, you're using Uptrust to reach out to your client. I think there is some, you know, in full disclosure, some sensitivity that just like if you texted your client and it was sitting on AT&T server, AT&T could be subpoenaed by a prosecutor. There is that, which is why we're now putting in our contracts that if we ever get subpoenaed, obviously we'll fight it, but we'll also make sure the attorney knows. But in terms of protecting client information, you know, we are, you know, encrypting everything so people can't sort of see it, hack into it, but also we are, you know, not sharing things. And we're also not collecting really sensitive information. So we're not looking at people's, you know, social security numbers and things like that. It's really mostly publicly available information, you know, when someone's court date is in their name.
Great, thanks, Jacob. Gabe or Jelani, how do you guys protect clients' information?
Yeah, so we similarly, the bigger risk would not necessarily be like a FOIA request, but a subpoena. And so we basically designed our whole system to collect as little personal data on people as possible. And so all of the communication happens, you know, between the attorney and their clients outside of Good Call. The only thing that we would hold on to is the kind of like name and contact information for our emergency contact directory, but we've designed that in a way so that there's no connection between individual people. And if we were subpoenaed, it would basically just be a list of names and numbers that, you know, a detective could call and hope that someone picks up, but it wouldn't be of you know, any more value than looking through like a Yellow Pages or anything else. And so we sort of took this approach of, you know, in the worst case scenario, if we got subpoenaed and it fell in the wrong hands, how can we make it so that the data itself wouldn't actually really be useful to that person?
Great, thanks. So Jacob, we have another question for you from the audience, which is, does Uptrust have a reminder part of your program for drug tests or other required services similar to the Promise app?
Yeah, I think, so the short answer is yes. You know, we customize the reminders for every sort of tool, or several jurisdictions. So we can remind people of drug treatment classes, AA meetings, domestic violence classes, basically anything that an attorney would want their client to attend, we remind them of. I would push that, slightly different from an app. We're not sort of geolocating and tracking people. So, we want people to know they have to attend things. We're not going to track them and see that they're actually there.
Great, thanks. We have another question for Good Call. Gabe or Jelani, can you tell us about what your plans for the future are and what the expansion to other parts of the country and New York City look like?
Sure, yeah. Jelani, do you want to start off and then I can fill in?
Yeah. So short term, we are expanding to the rest of the 5 boroughs in New York City, and we're starting that now. So we're expecting to have the technology active in all 5 boroughs within the next 6 weeks. So we're working with on-the-ground community groups, folks from John Jay, Apple Corps, and different groups within the city to hand out cards and information and really start from the grassroots. And then also on the legal service provider side, making sure that we're doing the training. Gabe is leading up a lot of our trainings for a lot of the public defenders and making sure that we're doing the scheduling for the arraignment shifts so that we're making sure that folks actually have that support. On top of that, we are looking at how we are going to make sure that the shifts are divvied and we are providing support in the long run. And then we're taking the data from this and seeing how that can work on a large scale, because we're seeing that folks getting this support has changed and has many different nuances for the outcomes. So what does that really mean for changing policy? We see in New York City that if folks have access to this resource because of a mandate, it may show that that really means something for early legal intervention and something that we could push forward. So really taking this data and learning and seeing how we can push that to scale moving forward. And we've had conversations with a couple other public defenders nationally, and we're thinking about what states that we may move to based on a variety of things. Gabe, you want to fill in on that also?
Yeah, I think that was a great overview. And another thing that we sort of have learned from talking to lots of different public defenders kind of across the country is that for some of our partners in New York here, like Legal Aid and Bronx Defenders and Harlem Neighborhood Defender Services, et cetera, they are a little bit more, like, they still don't have all the resources that they need, but they are better resourced than some other places in the country, and so they've been able to kind of provide this additional staffing for the hotline and support that work. But we know that's not the case for every jurisdiction. So for example, in New Orleans, we're looking at more of sort of like a joint fundraising model. We are a nonprofit, and so looking at how we can kind of work with different local public defender organizations, local government, funders, and community groups to kind of get all the pieces in place to allow us to replicate this model across the country.
Great, thank you. I do have another question that I'd like to ask both groups, because I think, we've focused a lot on the incredible accomplishments you guys have achieved in a very short amount of time, but I'm sure it was not all easy. So, Jacob, what kind of challenges have you experienced along the way?
Sure. I think for us, it's probably just been really difficult, no offense to people on the phone, navigating sort of government and procurement and IT, all the above. And so, I'd say if I break it into 2 parts, our first challenge was figuring out, who is the right counterparty. I think initially we actually thought the courts would be the right counterparty and they would want people to attend. And what we found when we were doing our research was that actually the courts wanted people to attend but didn't want to really understand the defendant's needs and really engage in knowing if someone was running late or had issues, et cetera. And so it was really, narrowing in on public defenders as our partner. As it relates to the government side, some systems have a case management system, some systems don't. Some people have, can make quicker decisions, some people cannot. And so for us, it's been trying to identify, leadership of public defender offices that really want to see this change. And if people are interested in seeing this change, we'll work with them to figure out if there's any budgetary issues. So in places like in Baltimore, or even some counties in California, you know, if, including I think someone on this call, there was an issue where they said, hey, I don't think we'll be able to afford this work, you know, over the next year or two, and we'll do is we'll partner with different foundations and provide grants. And so for us, it's really now the navigating difficulty, just finding the right attorneys and leadership that want to partner with us, because we can really take care of sort of the monetary side if need be.
Great, thanks, Jacob. So we have about 3 minutes left, so I'm going to ask one more question, and I'll start with you, Gabe and Jelani. So we've talked a lot about your vision for the future of your organization. What can the folks on this call do to support your vision?
So I think there's a couple different facets. Once again, as we talk about kind of expansion throughout New York City, reaching more communities here, and also nationally. And so I would say if you are a public defender office that's interested in potentially working with Good Call to do early legal intervention, we would love if you would reach out and start that conversation. If you work with any funders in this space that would be interested in kind of learning about our work, we would love to get in touch. And if you're connected to any kind of community organizations or local governments that would be interested in kind of bringing Good Call to their communities, we would love to get in touch about that as well. Jelani, anything to add to that?
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Awesome, thanks guys. And what about you, Jacob? What can the folks on this webinar do to support your vision for the future of Uptrust?
Sure, I think there's 2 parts, but there's 3 parts, I should say. The first part is, you know, similar to the Good Call folks, you know, we're always looking for more partners, right? And so if you're in a jurisdiction that you're interested in eliminating your client's FTAs, you know, we'd love to hear from you. You know, 2, I think there is, you know, also, even if this seems like something that's not of interest, if there's different community groups that you want to connect us to, you know, I think we're really interested in trying to think through how does the community get the right tools to provide some supportive services. And the third piece is, you know, a lot of these groups on the call are already doing it, but really think through how does your office sort of play with the mixture of community groups, grassroots organizers, as well as, you know, legislative advocacy organizations to really, you know, make sure you have a seat at the table and to push for things like bail reform and other types of criminal justice reform, because the public defenders have such immense knowledge and influence, or knowledge that they should have, I think, more influence.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jacob and Gabe and Jelani, for a fantastic discussion. If anyone has any questions for us here at the Right to Counsel National Campaign, feel free to reach out. Please also follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and be loud and proud on social media about your support of the Right to Counsel. Thanks again, everyone. Goodbye.